I think the real value of the event turned out to be the timing of it. When we initially planned it, we thought that it was going to be right around the time in which the debate was going to be culminating in a vote in the legislature. In fact, it ended up that the budget process in California ended up taking much longer than anyone thought, and it ended up that the event happened during a real lull in the conversation. And in fact, it happened during a time when health reform was almost being shoved to the side as an issue. And lots of people had kind of forgotten that the governor and the legislature had taken it on as an issue. And I think what it did was it really revived that conversation through the massive amount of attention that we got through the media, through the legislators coming out themselves and hearing about it, and through them themselves standing up in front of people and recommitting to this issue. I think it kind of re-sparked that conversation and that excitement about taking up the task again. What we learned from California Speaks is that the public is really concerned about this issue. They feel like there is a brokenness in the healthcare system that somebody in the public policy arena really needs to put their attention to fixing. And I think they believe that there are solutions out there. We also heard that the public is not as ideological as some of the stakeholders would like us to believe. I think that they think there are lots of different good ideas that could be out there, and we've just got to put our attention to getting everybody focused on that and really moving forward on at least one of those solutions. So I think that we heard from the public that they would really like us to continue to move this issue forward. It was incredibly important to us to make sure that the population of California Speaks represented the population of California. The whole point of this was to hear what people really feel. And while everybody's opinion is important, the perspective on the healthcare system of, say, a single mom in Bakersfield is going to be very different from, say, a surgeon in San Francisco. And both of those perspectives are really important, but we need to make sure that we're getting a real breadth of those voices. It was also really important to us that it be representative demographically in terms of ethnicity. That's really important because we know there are certain ethnic groups, particularly Latinos, that are overrepresented in the uninsured population in California. So it's really important to make sure that we had a good mix. When you have that kind of complex issue, that's the kind of thing where it's useful to actually have dialogue, because you may find some common ground that you don't expect to find. And you might find that you can establish some unlikely alliances between groups that may not normally think we agree, but they might in fact find some issues they agree on. So that's why I think an event like California Speaks was particularly good for health reform. We kind of talked about the California Speaks as being an opportunity to talk to the neighbors you don't know, because it's really people just like you, but they're not people that you know or talk to every day, and so you hear different perspectives, and people really got a chance to voice their own experiences, but also hear other people's experiences. I think that one of the real challenges about health reform is that it's so complex and there are so many entrenched interest groups that a lot of times those groups really get their voices heard and everyday people don't. And that's what we really wanted to try and short circuit, was that process by which only some people's voices are heard and not really everybody's. There are questions of trade-offs here, and I think that was one of the things that we really began to ask people to do. And I think that that too is an important take-home from the California Speaks event. People were in fact willing to make some trade-offs. They were willing to say, well, I'd take some of this if I had a little less of this. And that they weren't saying that everything has to be perfect. So I think that the sense that everyday Californians aren't willing to make those trade-offs in order to improve our system is an illusion that many politicians have. And I think that one of the things that California Speaks really helped us to do is to begin to dispel that illusion. We're a health foundation, and so this came up as a great opportunity for us around a moment in which the state of California is looking at health reform. But I think there's even a more fundamental reason why the California Speaks event appealed to us as a foundation. No matter what issue a foundation is working on, there's a fundamental problem we have with our political system, which is so many people feel completely disconnected from the process. And I think California Speaks and the whole America Speaks organization is a way in which people can begin to feel somewhat more plugged into that process. Democracy is phenomenal, it's great, but there is a sense that once they're elected, we never hear from them again. And I think this is a way for people to feel that they can plug back in on a really important issue in a way that's meaningful, and begin to hear their voices heard. And so that to me really matters, because I think that that's a concept that's important, whether you're working on health, whether you're working on education, that people need to feel connected to the people who are making decisions. And this was a terrific way to do that. Watching the whole thing come together was exciting and a little overwhelming. The process of bringing that many people together, 3,500 people, 8 sites, all satellite linked, is just an incredible logistical event to begin with. But really also, you start to get nervous, or we started to get nervous about, well, what are people going to say? And are people going to be engaged? And are they going to show up? And do people really care about healthcare as much as we who do this work all the time really think they do? And it was such an exciting day to arrive there and see people streaming in on a Saturday who didn't have to do this. They didn't have to be there. They weren't getting paid to show up. And they came because they care about this issue and because they really thought this was a great opportunity to have their voices heard. I think the staff of America Speaks understood the importance of bringing the elected officials along throughout the entire process and how to engage them. I think that foundations, frankly, often have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with elected officials, because we don't lobby, and that's not what we do, and that's not the kind of thing that we fund. We're often a little bit arm's length from legislative leaders. And the California Speaks process and the America Speaks staff were really quite clear about how important it was to bring them along in the process, not in order to lobby, but in order to get their buy-in and in order to get them to understand what they would get of value at the end of this conversation. And so I think that was really important because they developed those relationships, they maintained those relationships, they got their feedback and their input, and they got them there the day of the event. And so that's really important because it makes a big difference to people when you invite them to come and ask them to share their stories and talk about what matters to them, for them to have the governor of California stand up in the morning and welcome them to that conversation. It makes a big difference.